What if you woke up in September 1348 in the heart of London's worst nightmare? The Black Death has been ravaging the city for months. Bodies pile in the streets. Red crosses mark quarantined houses where families wait to die. The very air seems poisoned with corruption and despair. But you're not just anyone. You're a plague doctor. Behind a leather mask with crystal eyes and a long herb-filled beak, you carry the weight of a city's desperate hope. Your leather satchel holds lancets for bloodletting, vials of precious theriac, and a ledger growing heavy with the names of the dying. Today, like every day, you'll walk through London's plague-ravaged streets. You'll tend to a wealthy goldsmith's fevered son in his manor near the Thames. You'll climb narrow stairs to quarantined tenements, where mothers rock dying children. You'll face impossible choices about who receives expensive treatments and who gets only prayers. And tonight, you'll discover that sometimes the poorest patient needs you most of all. This is your day, these are your rounds. This is how you survive when your calling is to heal, but healing seems impossible. Welcome to medieval London, 1348. The plague bells are ringing. Your patients are waiting. Time to wake up, doctor. London needs you. You wake in the grey hour before dawn, your small chamber thick with the scent of dried herbs and vinegar. The leather plague mask hangs on its wooden peg beside your narrow bed, its long beak casting strange shadows in the flickering rushlight. September's chill seeps through the shuttered window of your lodging near Cheapside, and you can already hear the distant tolling of church bells, not calling the faithful to prayer, but marking another night's harvest of souls claimed by the great mortality. Your body aches as you rise from the straw mattress. 3 months of wearing the heavy protective robes, of bending over fevered bodies, of climbing endless stairs to sick rooms has taken its toll. Your joints protest as you reach for the pewter basin, splashing your face with water that carries the metallic taste of fear. In the looking glass, a luxury you've afforded yourself from the coins of desperate families, you see eyes that have witnessed too much death, a face grown gaunt from eating little and sleeping less. The leather satchel sits ready by the door, packed the night before with the tools of your profession: glass vials of vinegar, iron lancets for bloodletting, a small pot of theriac made from dozens of ingredients including viper's flesh, and your leather-bound ledger where you record the names of those beyond earthly help. Your prayer book rests on top, its pages worn smooth by countless readings over dying strangers who call out for God in their final moments. Outside your window, London stirs with the sounds of a city under siege, not by armies, but by an enemy that strikes without warning and shows no mercy. You hear the creak of cartwheels on cobblestones, the muffled sobs of mourners, the scratch of lime being scattered in the streets. Today will bring the same rounds as yesterday, the same desperate faces, the same futile treatments. Yet you dress because someone must tend to the dying. Someone must witness their final breath and speak their names aloud so they are not forgotten. You dress methodically in the ritual that has become as familiar as breathing. First, the thick woolen undergarments that will trap your sweat and heat throughout the long day ahead. Then the heavy leather robe that reaches to your ankles, its surface treated with wax to repel the corrupted air that carries pestilence. The leather is worn smooth in places from constant use, and despite your careful cleaning each night, it carries the phantom scent of sick rooms and death. Your hands, pale in the candlelight, pull on the thick gloves that extend past your wrists. The leather is stiff and makes delicate work difficult, but they are your barrier against the corruption that flows from fevered flesh. You flex your fingers, testing the grip that must hold lancets steady and lift fevered bodies with gentle care. These hands have closed countless eyes and folded countless arms across still chests. Now comes the mask, the leather beak that marks you as both healer and harbinger of doom. You lift it from its peg with reverence, running your fingers over the smooth surface that has been carefully treated and blessed. The crystal eyepieces, imported from Venice at great cost, gleam like insect eyes in the dim light. You pack the long beak with aromatic herbs, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage, lavender for peace, and cloves to sweeten the air you'll breathe through fabric filters. The mask settles over your head with familiar weight, transforming you from mortal man into something both more and less than human. Through the crystal lenses, the world takes on a strange, distorted quality. Colors muted, distances uncertain. Your breathing becomes labored, each inhalation drawing the herb-scented air through layers of cloth. The leather presses against your skin, and you know that by evening, red marks will trace where it has rested all day. You are no longer yourself, but the plague doctor, walking symbol of humanity's desperate struggle against the inevitable. You check your leather satchel with the careful attention of a priest preparing for Mass, each item a sacred tool in the ritual of healing, though healing, you know, is often beyond your power. The glass vials of vinegar catch the candlelight, their amber contents believed to purify corrupted air and cleanse infected wounds. You've watched families spend their last coins on such remedies, hope gleaming in their eyes as bright as the liquid in these bottles. Whether vinegar truly helps, or merely provides comfort through action, you cannot say. Your lancets rest in their felt-lined case, each blade honed to surgical sharpness. The theory of bloodletting seems sound release, the corrupted humors that cause fever and swelling. Yet you've seen strong men grow weaker after bleeding, their life force pooling on floor rushes rather than poison flowing from their veins. Still, the practice brings structure to helplessness, gives your hands purpose when prayer seems insufficient. The small ceramic pot of theriac sits wrapped in oiled cloth, its contents worth more than most families earn in a month. 64 ingredients ground together, including viper's flesh, cinnamon from distant lands, and herbs that grow only in monastery gardens. The wealthy merchants demand it, certain that expense equals efficacy. You've learned to speak of its virtues with conviction, though doubt gnaws at your conscience. Is hope worth the price they pay? Your prayer book completes the collection, its leather covers worn soft by handling. Between its pages lie the words that matter more than medicine, prayers for the dying, blessings for the bereaved, verses that bring peace when earthly remedies fail. This book has closed more suffering than all your other tools combined. Today, like every day since the great mortality came to London, you will need every tool in your satchel. Some for the body, some for the soul, all for the living who must watch their loved ones slip beyond reach. You step into London's fetid air, the wooden door closing behind you with a soft thud that marks the boundary between private sanctuary and public nightmare. The September morning wraps around you like a damp shroud, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, human waste, and something else, something sweet and cloying that you've learned to recognize as the smell of bodies awaiting collection. Through your crystal eyepieces, the familiar streets of Cheapside take on an otherworldly quality, shadows deeper, edges softer, as if the plague has drained color from the very stones. Already you can hear the death cart bells, their bronze voices calling across the city with mechanical regularity. Dong, 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 bring out your dead. The sound has become as much a part of London's dawn chorus as roosters once were, before hunger drove most families to eat their birds. You count the tolls from different quarters, 3 from the direction of St. Paul's, 2 from toward the Thames, 1 long continuous ringing from Aldgate that suggests the cart there is already full. Your leather boots echo on cobblestones, still damp with morning dew, each step deliberate and measured. The weight of your robes and the restricted vision of your mask force you to move with careful attention, like a monk processing to prayer. A shutter creaks open above you, and a woman's face appears briefly before withdrawing. They watch you pass with the mixture of hope and dread that has become familiar. You are both salvation and omen, the doctor who might heal their loved ones, or the dark figure who confirms their worst fears. The narrow streets seem narrower still through your crystal lenses, the overhanging upper floors of timber-framed houses creating a tunnel of perpetual twilight. Somewhere ahead, a child cries, not the robust wail of a healthy infant, but the thin, reedy sound of sickness. Your gloved hand tightens on your satchel strap. The day's work has begun, and already the city is calling for your ministrations with voices of pain and desperation. Your first house bears the red cross freshly painted on its oak door, the scarlet pigment still wet enough to catch the weak morning light. Below it, in the careful script of the parish clerk, the words, "Lord have mercy upon us," curve across the wooden planks like a prayer made visible. This is the home of Master Edmund Hartwell, a wool merchant whose prosperity once bought him a fine house on Cheapside, with glazed windows and a proper chimney. Now his wealth means nothing against the great mortality that has claimed first his youngest daughter, then his wife, and now reaches for him with invisible fingers. You lift your gloved hand to knock, but the door opens before knuckle meets wood. Martha, the family's sole remaining servant, stands in the shadowed doorway, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion. She stayed when others fled, loyalty binding her to this house of sorrow stronger than fear of contagion. Her curtsy is perfunctory. Social conventions matter little when death keeps such close company. "He worsens, doctor," she whispers, leading you through a hall that once rang with children's laughter, but now holds only the thick silence of grief. The floors are scrubbed with vinegar until the wood appears bleached, and pomanders hang from every beam, their clove-studded oranges releasing spice into air that tastes of desperation. Your boots make no sound on the rush mats as you follow her upstairs, each step taking you deeper into the house's embrace of sorrow. The servant chamber where Master Hartwell now lies was once used for storing goods bolts of finest wool from the Cotswolds, sealed jars of dyes from distant lands. Now it serves as sick room, chosen for its small window that can be easily sealed against corrupted air. Martha pauses at the door, crossing herself before lifting the latch. Inside, in the dim light filtered through oiled parchment, you can already hear the labored breathing that tells you this consultation may be your last with Edmund Hartwell, wool merchant of London. You examine the father's buboes through your crystal eyepieces, the swollen lymph glands standing out like grotesque fruit beneath the thin skin of his neck and armpits. Master Hartwell lies motionless on a mattress that once graced his marriage bed, now brought down to this humble chamber in his final days. The buboes have ripened to the size of hen's eggs, their surface tight and discolored, some dark purple, others bearing the telltale black spots that mark the pestilence's most virulent form. Through the distorted lens of your mask, they appear even more monstrous, like tumors growing from nightmares. His breathing comes in shallow gasps, each inhalation a struggle against the corruption that fills his lungs. When you lift his eyelids with a gentle finger, the whites have yellowed like old parchment, and broken blood vessels create a web of red across each orb. His skin burns with fever, yet feels clammy to your touch, and when you press your ear to his chest, the leather of your mask creaking against his nightshirt, you hear the wet rattle that speaks of fluid gathering where air should flow freely. "How long has he been like this?" you ask Martha, though you already know the answer from the progression of symptoms. 2 days, perhaps 3. The pestilence follows its own cruel timetable, neither hastening nor delaying for human convenience. She tells you he stopped speaking yesterday, though his lips sometimes move in what might be prayer or simply the body's automatic struggle for breath. His fingers, once nimble enough to judge wool's quality by touch alone, have begun to blacken at the tips where his life force retreats inward. You open your leather satchel with practiced efficiency, though your heart already knows this examination is mere ceremony. The tools emerge one by one: lancet for bloodletting, vial of vinegar for cleansing, pot of theriac that costs more than most earn in a year. But Master Hartwell's eyes have already taken on the glassy stare that looks beyond earthly remedies, toward whatever lies beyond the painted red cross on his door. The baker from episode 2 brings bread to this same street. You nod in passing as he makes his morning rounds, his cart creaking under the weight of loaves that smell like life itself in a city grown familiar with death. He recognizes your distinctive silhouette even from a distance, the long beaked mask making you unmistakable among London's surviving citizens. His acknowledgement is brief but respectful, a simple inclination of his flour-dusted head that speaks of mutual recognition between two who serve the living in different ways. Behind him trots the small figure of Alice, the orphaned girl who has become his apprentice, her thin arms straining under a basket of smaller loaves meant for households that can afford only meager portions. She steals glances at your strange form with the curious eyes of childhood, not yet fully educated in fear. The baker places a protective hand on her shoulder, guiding her past Master Hartwell's marked door with the practiced care of one who has learned to navigate between compassion and survival. You pause in the doorway of the merchant's house, watching them continue down Cheapside toward other customers, other lives that still cling to the routines of normalcy. The baker's bread will feed families who wake each morning uncertain if they will see another sunset. Alice's bright chatter, audible even through your leather mask, carries the resilience of youth, the ability to find small joys even in the shadow of catastrophe. Their presence reminds you that London still lives, still struggles, still hopes, despite the red crosses that multiply like poxmarks on the city's face. The contrast strikes you with unexpected force. Here you emerge from a house where death keeps vigil, while there they carry sustenance to those who yet draw breath. Both are necessary services in these dark times. Both require courage to continue when despair seems the only reasonable response. The baker feeds the body, you tend the soul, and somehow between these simple acts, the city endures another day. You adjust your leather gloves and continue toward your next appointment, carrying the tools of your calling through streets where hope and sorrow walk hand in hand. You attempt bloodletting while his wife weeps behind you, her sobs a counterpoint to the steady drip of crimson into the pewter basin. The lancet slides through Master Hartwell's fevered skin with practiced ease, finding the vein in his forearm that pulses weakly with what remains of his life force. The blood that flows is darker than it should be, thick and sluggish, carrying the corruption of pestilence in its very essence. You watch it pool in the basin, hoping against hope that somewhere in this ritual of release lies the key to drawing poison from his failing body. Martha holds his arm steady while you work, her rough servant's hands gentle against his burning skin. She has seen you perform this procedure on his wife, on his daughter, on a dozen neighbors whose names she whispers like a rosary of the lost. Each time she hopes, and each time that hope dims a little more. Yet still she holds, still she helps, still she believes that this time might be different. Her faith shames your growing doubts about the efficacy of your art. The wife, Mistress Catherine, continues her lament from the corner where she sits on a three-legged stool, her fine gown now stained with grief and sleeplessness. "Sweet Jesu, take this cup from us," She whispers between sobs, the same prayer she's offered hourly since her husband first complained of the swelling in his neck. Her hands work her rosary beads with desperate fervor, the wooden spheres worn smooth by constant handling. She no longer looks at your procedures, having learned that watching changes nothing. You press a cloth soaked in vinegar against the small wound, sealing it with the care of a mother tending a child's scraped knee. Master Hartwell's breathing remains labored, his fever unabated. The bloodletting has weakened him further, yet the ritual provides structure to helplessness. In your ledger tonight, you will record that you attempted the prescribed treatment. Whether it helps or hastens his end, only God knows, and he keeps his own counsel in these terrible days. You record the merchant's name in your ledger of the dying, the ink still wet as you carefully form each letter of Master Edmund Hartwell, wool merchant, Cheapside, in the ruled column reserved for those beyond earthly help. Your handwriting, usually precise from years of scholarly training, wavers slightly as you work. Whether from the weight of your leather gloves or the weight of what these entries represent, you cannot say. This book has become a register of London's heart. Each name a life cut short, a family destroyed, a future stolen by the great mortality. The ledger falls open naturally to pages filled with similar entries, accumulated over these terrible months of plague. Master William Cooper, fishmonger. Goodwife Margaret Thorne, seamstress. Young Thomas Fletcher, barely past his apprenticeship. Each entry tells the same story in different words: fever, swelling, prayers, death. Your careful script transforms human suffering into ordered rows of text, as if documentation might somehow make sense of senselessness. Martha watches you write from the doorway, understanding instinctively what this moment means. She has seen you make similar entries for her master's wife and daughter, has watched other physicians perform the same ritual in other houses throughout the city. There is something both terrible and comforting about this bureaucracy of death. Terrible because it reduces beloved souls to lines of ink. Comforting because it ensures they will not be forgotten entirely. You pause before closing the book, studying the growing list of names that represents your failure as much as your service. Each entry marks a life you could not save, a family you could not preserve, a prayer that went unanswered despite your best efforts. Yet someone must keep this record. Someone must bear witness to the scope of London's suffering. Tonight, when you transcribe these names into the parish death roll, Master Hartwell will join the official count of souls claimed by pestilence. Until then, he exists in the private grief of these pages, waiting for your ink to dry. You leave vinegar and prayers, knowing both are equally useless against the corruption that has claimed Master Hartwell's mortal form, yet offering them because hope requires gestures, even when reason counsels despair. The small glass vial of vinegar rests on the wooden table beside his bed, its amber contents catching what little light filters through the oiled parchment window. Martha will dab it on his burning forehead throughout the day, finding comfort in the act of tending, even as his breath grows more labored with each passing hour. Your prayers fall into the thick air of the sick room, like stones into deep water, disappearing without trace, yet somehow necessary for the living who remain. Mistress Catherine clutches her rosary tighter as your voice rises and falls in the familiar cadences of last rites, the Latin words providing structure to chaos even when their meaning brings little comfort. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, the ancient formula that has blessed countless departures from this world to whatever lies beyond. Martha crosses herself as you finish the prayer, her work-hardened hands moving with practiced devotion. She has heard these same words spoken over every member of this household, has watched you perform these same rituals for neighbors and strangers alike. Yet still she listens with the attention of faith. Still she believes that prayers matter even when they do not heal. Her constancy humbles you more than any scholarly disputation about the nature of divine mercy. You close your prayer book with the soft sound of leather meeting leather, the golden clasps clicking shut on words that offer peace, if not preservation. As you gather your satchel and prepare to leave this house of sorrow, you know you carry Master Hartwell's name with you, not just in your ledger's ink, but in the growing burden of souls you have blessed toward their final rest. The vinegar may evaporate, but prayers, you hope, endure beyond the speaking of them. You climb narrow stairs, counting the red crosses on doors as you ascend through the tenement's vertical maze of human misery. Each cross marks another family surrendered to quarantine, another household where the living and dying share the same fetid air in rooms too small for proper separation. The paint drips down the wood like tears of blood, still wet enough to stain your leather gloves when you steady yourself against the walls. "Lord, have mercy upon us," appears on door after door, the desperate plea growing more frantic with each repetition. The stairs beneath your feet have been worn into shallow bowls by generations of passage, their edges polished smooth by countless hands grasping the rope banister that serves as the only barrier between climbers and a fatal fall. Your plague mask makes navigation treacherous. The long beak limits your downward vision, forcing you to feel for each step with careful deliberation. The leather of your robes catches on splinters and nails protruding from walls that have seen better centuries. Between the floors, narrow windows offer glimpses of London's suffering streets. Through your crystal lenses, you can see other plague doctors moving like dark beetles between buildings marked for quarantine, each carrying their own burden of futile remedies and inevitable farewells. Smoke rises from countless chimneys where families burn aromatic woods and herbs, filling the September air with the scent of desperate purification rituals. The sounds of the tenement envelope you as you climb, mothers singing lullabies to fevered children, men reciting prayers in voices grown hoarse from vigil, the soft shuffle of feet as caretakers move between beds that serve as death watches. Each floor holds its own symphony of sorrow, and you are climbing through the layers of London's pain toward another family that has sent for your services, knowing your presence brings both hope and the confirmation of their deepest fears. Your next call awaits at the quarantine tenement near St. Paul's, a narrow building that houses 3 families in spaces meant for one, where the pestilence spreads from room to room like fire through dry rushes. The building leans against its neighbor at a precarious angle, centuries of settling having created gaps between the timber framing that whistle with every gust of wind. Through these cracks, the corruption passes freely, making quarantine a bitter jest. You can smell the sickness before you see the building, that sweet, cloying scent of fever and approaching death that hangs around plague houses like invisible fog. The street before the tenement tells its own story of London's suffering. Chamber pot contents flow in rivulets down the center channel, mixing with rainwater and the lime that householders scatter desperately in the belief that clean streets might somehow cleanse corrupted air. A stray dog, ribs visible through mangy fur, picks through refuse that no longer interests human scavengers. Even the beggars have learned to avoid these streets where charity comes too dear a price. You pause at the building's threshold, adjusting the herb-packed beak of your mask and checking that your gloves fit snugly to your wrists. The wooden stairs inside creak ominously with each step, worn smooth by countless feet, but now treacherous with the dampness that comes from too many bodies sharing too little space with insufficient air. The building groans around you like a living thing in pain, its timbers stressed beyond their intended limits. Each floor brings new sounds of suffering, the delirious mumbling of fever, the wet coughing that speaks of lungs drowning in corruption, the whispered prayers of family members who tend the dying with hands that tremble from exhaustion and fear. You climb steadily upward, your leather robes rustling with each step, carrying your burden of inadequate remedies toward another appointment with mortality's inexorable advance. In one room, a mother holds her fevered child, a boy of perhaps 8 years whose bright hair lies damp with sweat against his mother's breast. She rocks him with the gentle motion of love-fighting desperation, humming a tune that might once have helped him sleep, but now serves as comfort for them both in what may be their final hours together. The child's breathing comes in quick, shallow pants, and when you examine him through your crystal eyepieces, you can see the telltale flush of fever across his pale cheeks. The mother goodwife Anne looks up at your approach with eyes that hold the particular exhaustion of those who have watched pestilence claim their world piece by piece. Her husband succumbed 5 days past, the older children 3 days ago. Now only she and young Martin remain in this small chamber that reeks of vinegar, burned herbs, and the sweet corruption of advancing plague. She does not ask if you can save him. She has learned that such questions bring only disappointment. "He stopped taking water this morning," she whispers, her voice barely audible above the child's labored breathing. Her dress, once a respectable brown wool suitable for a tradesman's wife, now hangs loose on her diminished frame. She has eaten little, given most of their remaining food to the boy, in the hope that nourishment might help him fight what no earthly sustenance can overcome. Her sacrifice speaks louder than any sermon about the nature of maternal love. You kneel beside them on the rush-covered floor, your leather robes spreading around you like dark wings. Through your mask's crystal lenses, you study the boy's symptoms with the detached precision your training demands, even as your heart breaks for the mother whose world narrows to this single small life slipping beyond her desperate embrace. The professional assessment forms in your mind, but speaking it aloud would serve no purpose save cruelty. You recognize the night watchman from episode 1, standing guard outside the building, his familiar silhouette unmistakable even through your distorted vision. Thomas the watchman leans against the timber frame of the tenement's entrance, his leather jack darkened with morning dew, and his wooden staff worn smooth by countless nights of patrol through London's plague-ravaged streets. His presence here speaks of duty that extends beyond his official rounds. He has taken upon himself the task of ensuring that quarantined families receive what help the living can offer. He nods gravely as you emerge from the tenement, a gesture of mutual recognition between two who serve London's suffering in different capacities. His weathered face bears new lines since you last saw him making his rounds past Master Hartwell's house, and his eyes hold the particular weariness of one who has seen too much death compressed into too short a time. Yet still he stands his post, still he maintains his vigil, still he ensures that the quarantined are not entirely abandoned to their fate. "The boy?" he asks quietly, though your expression through the crystal lenses must already provide his answer. Thomas has learned to read the subtle signs that distinguish between cases where hope might linger and those where only final comfort remains. Your slow shake of the head confirms what he suspected, adding young Martin to the growing tally of souls he has watched approach their final rest during these terrible months. "His mother," you begin, but Thomas raises a hand to forestall your words. He understands without explanation. Goodwife Anne will need practical help in the days ahead, will require someone to ensure she receives food and fuel for the fire that must burn through her son's final hours. The watchman's network of surviving citizens operates with quiet efficiency, providing what mercy can be offered to those trapped behind red crosses. His service extends far beyond the simple maintenance of order into the realm of preserving human dignity amid catastrophe. You perform the ritual bloodletting, though you know it brings no healing. The lancets sliding through young Martin's burning skin, while his mother strokes his damp hair with fingers that tremble between hope and resignation. The boy's blood flows darker than it should, carrying corruption in its very essence, yet the familiar routine provides structure to helplessness. Goodwife Anne watches with the desperate attention of one who believes that proper execution of medical ritual might somehow change what cannot be changed. The pewter basin catches each crimson drop with the small sound of liquid meeting metal, a percussion that marks time in this chamber where hours stretch like days and minutes feel like eternities. You monitor the flow with practiced precision, knowing when to seal the small wound before weakness overwhelms what little strength remains in his small frame. The child's breathing grows more labored as his life force pools in the basin, yet still you continue because the act provides meaning when nothing else can. Martha's brother, a carpenter by trade, has come to help tend the boy, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he holds the child steady during your procedure. He speaks in whispers to his sister Anne, offering comfort through shared memory of better times, of festivals when children ran through streets now marked with red crosses, of harvest celebrations in seasons before the great mortality came to claim London's joy. His presence transforms the sick room from a place of solitary despair into a space where community endures even in extremity. You press vinegar-soaked cloth against the small wound, sealing it with the same care you would show your own child if fate had blessed you with such treasure. The ritual is complete, the prescribed treatment administered, yet young Martin's fever burns unchanged and his breathing remains shallow. In your leather satchel, you carry other remedies: theriac, blessed herbs, holy water from St. Paul's, but their power extends only to the comfort they provide, those who yet hope for miracles. A wealthy guildmaster summons you to his manor near London Bridge, his messenger arriving breathless at the tenement door, with coins clutched in his fist and panic bright in his eyes. Master Geoffrey Aldrich, head of the Goldsmiths Guild, has built his fortune crafting precious vessels for nobles and churches, his workshops producing goblets and reliquaries that will outlast the plague by centuries. Yet gold provides no immunity from pestilence, and his wealth cannot purchase exemption from mortality's universal claim. The messenger, a boy of perhaps 12 who has survived this long through speed and cunning, tugs at your leather sleeve with the urgency of one who knows that delay might cost him his promised payment. Master says, "Come quickly, doctor," he gasps, his words tumbled together by fear and exertion. His son shows the signs, and my lady weeps something terrible. Behind his youth lies the hardened wisdom of survival, the knowledge that even wealthy households succumb to the same corruption that claims paupers and princes alike. You gather your satchel and follow the boy through streets that grow broader and cleaner as you approach the Thames, where successful merchants have built homes that speak of prosperity accumulated through generations of careful trade. The cobblestones here fit more precisely together. The timber framing of the houses shows the work of master carpenters, and glass windows reflect the morning light like jewels. Yet even here, red crosses mark doorways where wealth proved powerless against the great mortality. The boy leads you past the church of St. Magnus, where the bells toll constantly for souls departing to whatever lies beyond earthly suffering. Your leather boots echo differently on these well-maintained streets, and through your crystal lenses you can see servants peering from upper windows, their faces bearing the same mixture of hope and dread that you have learned to recognize in every quarter of London. Disease respects no boundaries of class or coin, making equals of all who draw breath in these pestilent times. You enter through servants' quarters to protect his household, following the established protocol that keeps the corruption of your calling from contaminating the main living spaces where healthy family members still draw clean breath. The back entrance leads through kitchens that once bustled with preparations for feast days and guild celebrations, but now stand largely empty save for one faithful cook who tends a small fire and boils water infused with herbs thought to purify the air. The wooden floors here shine with frequent scrubbing, and vinegar scents every surface. Master Aldrich waits in the servants' hall, his fine clothes unable to mask the terror that haunts his eyes. His doublet, cut from expensive wool and trimmed with silver thread that speaks of his guild's mastery, hangs loose on a frame diminished by sleepless nights and the particular exhaustion of watching plague approach his most precious treasure. His hands, soft from a lifetime of supervising rather than laboring, shake as he gestures toward the narrow stairs that lead to the chamber where his son lies. "Doctor, I beg you," he whispers, his voice cracking like that of a much older man. "Whatever gold you require, whatever remedies exist in Christendom, I will pay gladly. My boy, he is but 15, with all his life before him. Surely there must be something, some treatment." His words trail off as he reads the familiar expression behind your crystal eyepieces. He has seen other physicians leave his neighbors' houses with the same careful compassion that offers no false promises. The household moves around you with the hushed efficiency of practiced crisis. Servants carry heated stones wrapped in cloth to warm the sick room, while others tend braziers filled with aromatic woods believed to cleanse corrupted air. Lady Margaret, the boy's mother, can be heard sobbing in the solar above, her grief echoing through timbers that have sheltered this family through 3 generations of prosperity. Yet all their careful preparations cannot change what awaits in the chamber where young Master Robert fights his losing battle against pestilence. His son shows early symptoms: black fingers, swollen neck, the unmistakable signs that marked the pestilence's inexorable advance through yet another young body. Master Robert Aldrich lies on a bed that cost more than most families see in a lifetime, its carved headboard depicting scenes from the saints' lives that now seem to mock the suffering playing out upon fine linen sheets. The boy's skin has taken on the waxy pallor that speaks of corruption spreading through his blood, and his breathing comes in shallow gasps that grow more labored with each passing hour. The swelling in his neck has begun, the lymph glands rising like small hills beneath skin that burns with fever. His fingers, once nimble enough to help in his father's workshop, now show the telltale darkening at the tips where his life force retreats inward, abandoning the extremities to focus on the vital organs that struggle to sustain his failing body. When you lift his eyelids with gentle care, the whites have already begun to yellow, and tiny blood vessels have burst to create a web of red across each eye. His mother kneels beside the bed, her silk gown pooled around her like spilled wine, her hands working rosary beads with desperate fervor. Lady Margaret has aged a decade in the few days since her son first complained of the ache in his joints, her face drawn tight with the particular anguish of those who must watch helplessly as death stalks their children. She looks up at your approach with eyes that plead for miracles, even as reason tells her none exist. You approach the bedside with practiced care, your leather robes rustling softly in the chamber that reeks of expensive perfumes burned to mask the sweeter smell of approaching death. Through your crystal lenses, you study the progression of symptoms with the clinical detachment your calling requires, even as your heart breaks for parents who believed their wealth could shield their beloved child from mortality's democratic embrace. You prescribe expensive theriac and unicorn horn powder, knowing the remedies will bring no healing but understanding that hope sometimes requires costly gestures to sustain belief in the possibility of salvation. Master Aldrich listens with desperate attention as you speak of the theriac's 64 ingredients, each more precious than the last, ground together according to ancient formulas that promise to drive corruption from the blood. Your voice carries the authority of learning, even as doubt gnaws at your conscience. The unicorn horn powder ground, from what merchants swear, comes from the legendary beast's spiraled horns, costs more than a skilled craftsman earns in a year. You measure it carefully into a silver spoon that bears the goldsmith's mark, its surface polished to mirror brightness. The powder dissolves in blessed wine from the cathedral's stores, creating a mixture that gleams like liquid starlight in the chamber's candle-lit gloom. Whether horn of unicorn or narwhal matters little when weighed against a father's desperate need to act. How often should he take it, Doctor? Master Aldrich asks, his voice steady with the artificial calm of one who has found purpose in following precise instructions. You provide a regimen that will occupy the household through the boy's remaining hours. Theriac morning and evening, unicorn horn at midday, prayers at all hours. The routine gives structure to helplessness, transforms passive waiting into active care, provides meaning when meaning seems impossible to find. Lady Margaret nods through her tears as you explain each remedy's proper administration, her hands trembling as she accepts the precious vials that represent their family's last hope. The gold they pay could feed a dozen families through winter, yet neither parent hesitates. In these terrible times, parents learn that love cannot be measured in coin, that hope requires investment regardless of earthly cost, and that doing something, anything, matters more than the likelihood of success. The father pays in gold, believing money can purchase salvation, his heavy purse emerging from beneath his doublet with the weight of accumulated prosperity. The coins catch candlelight as they spill across the wooden table, ducats from Venice, florins from Florence, English nobles bearing the king's mark. Each piece represents hours of skilled labor, careful trade, and the patience required to build wealth across generations. Yet Master Aldrich counts them out with the desperate haste of one who has learned that all earthly treasure means nothing when weighed against a child's life. Take more, Doctor, if there are other remedies, he pleads, pushing additional coins across the scarred wood surface. His hands shake as he speaks, and you can see in his eyes the particular madness of those who discover that problems which once yielded to gold now resist every earthly solution. The goldsmith, who has spent his life understanding the precise value of precious metals, now confronts a transaction where no price can guarantee the desired outcome. You accept what custom demands for your services, knowing that refusing payment would only increase his desperation. The weight of gold in your leather purse feels heavier than usual, each coin a reminder of the gap between what wealth can purchase and what love requires. Master Aldrich watches your face through your crystal lenses, searching for some sign that his payment has unlocked remedies previously withheld, that sufficient gold might yet turn back the pestilence that stalks his son. Lady Margaret adds her own jewelry to the payment rings inherited from grandmothers, brooches that marked feast days and celebrations, chains that once graced her neck at guild ceremonies. She strips these treasures from her fingers and throat with the fierce determination of a mother who would give flesh itself if it might save her child. The accumulated wealth of 3 generations spreads before you, yet all of it together cannot purchase one more day of breath for young Master Robert. Word reaches you. The baker's orphan Alice shows plague signs, and suddenly your rounds take on a different urgency as you realize the small girl who brought such hope to Episode 2's narrative now faces the same corruption that claims rich and poor alike. The message comes from a breathless child who found you at Master Aldrich's manor, her small hands tugging at your leather robes with the desperate strength of one who carries news too terrible to delay. Alice is burning with fever, she gasps, and the baker calls for you. You feel your heart sink beneath your protective robes as memories surface of the bright-eyed orphan who brought life back to the baker's shop, whose laughter echoed through Cheapside like a promise that joy might survive even in these dark times. Alice, who learned to knead dough with hands too small for the work, who swept floors with earnest concentration, who represented hope itself in a world grown familiar with despair. Now pestilence reaches for her with the same indifferent cruelty that claims merchant princes and paupers alike. The irony strikes you with painful clarity. You have just accepted a fortune in gold to provide useless remedies to Master Robert, while Alice, who possesses nothing save the baker's love and her own fierce will to live, faces the same enemy with only prayer and whatever simple medicines her guardian can afford. The contrast highlights the cruel mathematics of plague. Wealth may purchase comfort and ceremony, but death makes no distinction between silver spoons and wooden bowls. You excuse yourself from the goldsmith's manor, with the careful politeness that protocol demands, your mind already racing toward Cheapside where another child, this one dear to your heart from her role in the city's small revival, awaits your ministrations. The gold weighs heavy in your purse, a reminder of how little earthly treasure matters when weighed against the simple human connections that make survival meaningful. Alice needs you, and gold cannot purchase what she requires most, healing that works. You hurry to the shop, finding the baker frantically mixing remedies with the desperate energy of one who has learned that action provides sanity when rational hope fails. The familiar space that once filled with warmth and the scent of rising dough now reeks of vinegar and burning herbs, as every surface bears evidence of his attempts to drive corruption from the air. His adopted daughter breathes. Flour mixes with medicinal powders on the wooden counter, and bread loaves cool beside vials of dubious potions purchased from anyone claiming knowledge of plague cures. The baker, whose name you learned is Master William during the events of Episode 2, looks up at your approach with eyes that hold the particular anguish of those who have found love, only to watch pestilence threaten to steal it away. His flour-dusted apron bears stains of spilled remedies and tears, and his hands shake as he continues grinding herbs with mortar and pestle. "Doctor, thank God you've come," he whispers, his voice breaking. She took ill in the night, burning with fever and calling out in her sleep. Behind the shop counter, makeshift arrangements transform the workspace into a sick room. Alice lies on a bed of grain sacks, covered with the baker's own blankets, her small form nearly lost beneath layers of wool meant to sweat out the corruption that burns through her young body. Her face, once bright with the irrepressible joy of a child who had found safety after loss, now flushes with fever, and her breathing comes in the quick, shallow pants that speak of lungs struggling against corruption. The contrast with Master Aldrich's gold-laden chamber strikes you immediately. Here, love makes do with simple materials, and devotion expresses itself through flour-dusted hands rather than silver spoons. Yet the essential elements remain the same: a guardian's desperate love, a child's failing breath, and your own inadequate remedies carried in a leather satchel that has grown heavy with the weight of accumulated failure. Wealth or poverty, palace or shop pestilence makes mockery of all human distinctions save the depth of love that surrounds the dying. You examine Alice's small form, feeling the familiar helplessness that comes with recognizing symptoms that follow their inevitable course regardless of the healer's skill or the patient's worthiness of salvation. Her fever burns through the thin fabric of her nightgown, and small buboes have begun to rise beneath the delicate skin of her neck. At 7 years old, She possesses neither the strength of adult constitution nor the resources that money might provide, yet her eyes still hold the spark of fierce will that helped her survive orphanhood on London's cruel streets. The baker hovers beside you as you conduct your examination, his face twisted with the particular agony of one who has tasted hope, only to watch it threatened by forces beyond human control. "She was learning to read, Doctor," he whispers, as if education might somehow shield her from mortality's reach. "I was teaching her letters, so she might keep accounts when she grows." His voice trails off as he confronts the possibility that Alice's growing might end in this flower-dusted chamber. Your leather-gloved hands move with gentle precision as you check each symptom, though your heart already knows what your training confirms. The plague follows its merciless progression, regardless of age or innocence, claiming children with the same indifference it shows to aged sinners. Yet Alice's breathing, while labored, lacks the wet rattle that speaks of lungs drowning in corruption, and her fever, though high, has not yet reached the burning intensity that marks the final stages. Through your crystal eyepieces, you study her small face and see not just another victim of London's suffering, but the embodiment of hope that has sustained this city through its darkest months. Her survival represents more than one child's life. It symbolizes the possibility that goodness might endure, that love can triumph over despair, that tomorrow might yet hold promise despite today's overwhelming sorrow. The weight of this responsibility settles on your shoulders like a cloak made of lead. You make the hardest choice, honest words about her chances, though every instinct screams against crushing the baker's desperate hope with the brutal mathematics of plague mortality. Master William deserves truth rather than comfortable lies, yet speaking honestly means acknowledging that Alice, bright, brave Alice, who brought joy back to this shop, faces the same merciless enemy that has claimed thousands throughout London. The words stick in your throat like ground glass, each syllable a small betrayal of the love that surrounds this child. "The fever burns high," you say quietly, removing your crystal eyepieces to meet his gaze directly. The swelling has begun, and her breathing grows labored. "I have seen these signs before, Master William." You cannot bring yourself to speak the final verdict directly, but your meaning hangs in the air between you, like incense at a funeral mass. The baker's face crumples as understanding penetrates his desperate denial. "But she's strong," he whispers, his flour-dusted hands trembling as they smooth Alice's damp hair. "She survived the streets, survived hunger, survived losing everything she knew." Surely, his voice breaks, and you watch hope war with knowledge in his weathered features. This man, who has learned to judge the precise moment when dough has risen enough to bake, now confronts a process beyond human timing or control. The professional assessment wars with personal affection as you study Alice's fevered form. Your training demands clinical detachment, yet months of watching her transform this shop from a place of mere survival into something approaching joy makes objectivity impossible. She represents more than one orphaned child. She embodies the possibility that love might preserve life even when medicine fails, that human connection might prove stronger than corruption, that sometimes the heart's wisdom exceeds the mind's careful calculations. Yet honesty compels you to prepare her guardian for the likelihood that love alone cannot turn back pestilence. The baker begs for any treatment, offering his last coin with the desperate generosity of one who would spend his soul's salvation if it might purchase earthly healing for his adopted daughter. The handful of silver pennies he presses into your palm represents weeks of careful saving, bread sold to customers who themselves struggle to afford daily sustenance. Each coin carries the weight of his sacrifice, meals foregone, comforts denied, security abandoned in favor of hope that medicine might accomplish what love alone cannot. "Please, doctor," he pleads, his voice cracking with exhaustion and terror. "I know you carry remedies for the wealthy, treatments that cost more than I can afford. But I'll give everything. The shop, my tools, my freedom if necessary. Make me your bondsman if you must, but save her." His offer touches the deepest wound in your profession's conscience, the gap between what healing costs and what love can afford. The coins in your palm feel heavier than Master Aldrich's gold ducats, weighted with a different kind of currency entirely. These pennies represent not wealth but devotion, not abundance but sacrifice, not privilege, but pure human love distilled into its most desperate expression. The baker's savings cannot purchase theriac or unicorn horn, cannot buy the costly ceremonies that wealthy families demand, yet his willingness to offer everything he possesses speaks to values that gold cannot measure. You close your fingers around his modest payment, knowing it represents a fortune in terms of what it cost him to gather, understanding that refusing it would rob him of the dignity that comes with contributing to his beloved's care. In your leather satchel rest the expensive remedies purchased by Master Aldrich's gold, substances that will bring no more healing to a goldsmith's son than the simple vinegar and herbs you can offer Alice. The cruel irony strikes you with renewed force. Wealth and poverty stand equally powerless before pestilence, yet the world demands different treatments based on the patient's purse rather than their need. Evening approaches as you visit the plague pit near Aldgate, where London's mounting dead receive their final rest in common ground that grows larger with each passing day. The massive excavation stretches beyond what any reasonable mind could have imagined when the great mortality first appeared in the city, its depths now measured in stories rather than feet. The sight strikes you anew each time. This wound in the earth that swallows London's children, parents, lovers and strangers with equal indifference to their earthly stations or spiritual preparation. The cart driver who brings today's harvest of souls recognizes your distinctive silhouette and nods with the weary respect of one professional greeting another. He has learned to time his rounds to arrive just as you finish your own visits to the dying, understanding that the plague doctor's presence signals fresh burdens for his creaking wagon. His horse, thin from overwork and poor fodder, stands with the patience of a beast that has learned to wait while human sorrow completes its necessary rituals. Lime dust rises in clouds as workers scatter the precious powder over today's additions to the pit, their faces covered with cloth soaked in vinegar against the corrupted air that rises from so much concentrated death. The white powder settles over rich merchants' clothing and paupers' rags with equal thoroughness, transforming individual tragedies into anonymous layers of London's suffering. Each shovelful represents families destroyed, futures ended, love interrupted by mortality's democratic reach. The September air carries the sound of church bells tolling across the city, not calling faithful to prayer, but marking another day's surrender to pestilence. You count the different voices, St. Paul's great bronze tongue, the smaller bells of parish churches, the hurried clanging from hospitals and charitable houses. Each tone represents lives concluded, names that will join the growing ledgers of the dead, souls departing London for whatever lies beyond earthly suffering. The musical chaos creates a symphony of loss that provides the soundtrack for your evening duties. The gravedigger from episode 2 greets you with grim familiarity, his massive frame silhouetted against the evening sky like some ancient monument to human endurance in the face of overwhelming sorrow. Through 3 months of shared labor at this terrible place, you and he have developed the wordless understanding of those who work in death's shadow, each recognizing in the other a man who continues his calling, despite witnessing more suffering than any soul should bear. His greeting nods carry no false cheer, only acknowledgement that both of you have returned to this necessary work. "Doctor," he says simply, his voice carrying the particular hoarseness that comes from breathing lime dust and calling prayers over mass graves. His hands, permanently stained white from handling the blessed powder that sanctifies common burial, gesture toward the fresh section of the pit where tonight's work awaits. The familiar routine brings strange comfort. Even in the face of unprecedented catastrophe, human ritual provides structure that makes bearable the unbearable. You work together in practiced silence, you speaking the prayers while he ensures proper placement and coverage of the day's harvest of souls. His massive strength handles tasks that would break lesser men, while your education provides the Latin words that ease the passage from earthly suffering to whatever lies beyond. Together, you create a partnership that honors both the spiritual and physical needs of London's countless dead. The gravedigger's wife brings him evening meals that he shares with you without ceremony, understanding that those who tend the dead must themselves be tended. Her simple bread and ale taste of life, continuing despite death's presence, of human kindness persisting even in the shadow of mass graves. These small acts of generosity remind you that London still harbors souls capable of compassion, that community endures even when individual lives fall like leaves in autumn's wind. You perform last rites over dozens of unclaimed bodies, the Latin prayers flowing from your lips like water from a spring that will not run dry, despite the endless demands placed upon its depths. Requiem aeternam dona eis, Domine grant them eternal rest, O Lord. The ancient words carrying the same power, whether spoken over merchant princes or nameless beggars. In death, all earthly distinctions dissolve into the democracy of dust, and your prayers make no distinction between those who died in silk and those who perished in rags. Each body tells a story that ends the same way: fever, swelling, the final surrender to corruption that respects neither virtue nor vice. Here lies a young mother, still clutching a wooden toy meant for a child who preceded her to this place. There rests an apprentice whose guild badge speaks of skills that will die with him. Beyond them stretches a merchant whose purse, emptied by desperate purchases of useless remedies, provided no more protection than the prayers of paupers. The lime dust settles over your leather robes as you move from body to body, each blessing a small defiance against the anonymity that mass burial threatens to impose. Your voice grows hoarse from continuous prayer. Yet you persist because someone must speak these names aloud. Someone must acknowledge that each represented a life fully lived, despite its brevity. The gravedigger listens respectfully, crossing himself at appropriate moments in the liturgy. The September evening brings cooling air that provides relief from the day's heat, but cannot diminish the overwhelming scent of mortality that rises from the pit like incense from a cursed altar. You breathe through the herbs packed in your mask's beak, yet still the reality of London's suffering penetrates your defenses. Tonight, dozens more join the countless souls who have passed through your prayers into whatever lies beyond earthly pain. You record names when families provide them, preserving final dignity for souls who might otherwise disappear into the anonymity of mass burial without trace or memory of their earthly passage. Your ledger, already heavy with accumulated entries, receives new additions written in ink mixed with your own tears. Margaret Spinner, seamstress of Cordwainer Street. Young Tom Cooper, son to William the fishmonger. Goodwife Anne Hartley, survived by none. Each name represents not just death, but the end of bloodlines, the conclusion of family stories, the silence where voices once brought laughter to London's streets. The families who accompany their dead to this final resting place clutch whatever possessions survived the selling of household goods to purchase medicines that brought no healing. A wooden comb, a pewter cup, a child's worn doll. These humble treasures speak more eloquently of love than the golden goblets that Master Aldrich's wealth could provide. You handle each offered memento with reverence, understanding that these objects carry the weight of memory for those who remain. Some mourners whisper additional information they hope you will preserve. She baked the finest bread on Milk Street. He sang in the church choir every Sunday. She tended 6 children and never complained. These fragments of biography find their way into the margins of your ledger, creating a record that honors not just the fact of death, but the richness of lives fully lived despite their earthly brevity. The gravedigger helps families who cannot afford proper burial markers by setting aside distinctive stones that mark approximate locations within the pit. His gesture costs nothing but provides immeasurable comfort to those who need a place to direct their prayers. These small acts of kindness remind you that humanity endures even in the shadow of unprecedented catastrophe, that compassion survives when survival itself seems impossible. You wonder if your own name will someday fill these ledgers, as the constant exposure to corruption through your calling makes pestilence as much an occupational hazard as falling timber threatens carpenters or drowning menaces fishermen. Each day brings fresh contact with the dying. Each examination exposes you to the same corrupted air that fells your patience. Each prayer spoken over plague victims draws you closer to joining their eternal rest. Yet you continue because someone must tend the dying. Someone must witness their final struggles. Someone must speak their names into the gathering darkness. The leather mask that protects you carries its own risks. The herbs that purify your breath also restrict it. The crystal lenses that guard your eyes also limit your vision. The heavy robes that shield your body also trap your heat. Some nights you wonder whether your protective measures delay pestilence or merely postpone the inevitable confrontation with mortality that awaits all who work in death's shadow. The question haunts your dreams without providing answers your waking mind can accept. Your own symptoms receive constant monitoring. Each morning's self-examination checks for the telltale swelling. Each evening's reflection searches for signs of fever or discoloration. The irony would be profound. The plague doctor claimed by plague, the healer unable to heal himself, the witness to so much suffering finally experiencing it firsthand. Yet fear of personal death pales beside grief for the patients you cannot save, the families you cannot comfort, the names you cannot preserve. The ledger's weight in your hands grows heavier with each passing day, not from the physical accumulation of pages, but from the spiritual burden of souls recorded and released. Tonight, you will add Master Hartwell's name to the official parish rolls. Tomorrow, perhaps young Master Robert. And someday, God willing, not soon, Alice's bright spirit might join this sorrowful catalogue. The mathematics of plague reduce human existence to columns of numbers, yet each entry represents a universe of love, loss, and final surrender to forces beyond earthly control. You return through empty streets, mask heavy with the day's horrors, your leather boots echoing on cobblestones that reflect the weak light of torches set at crossroads to guide night travelers through a city transformed by pestilence. The familiar weight of your protective gear feels heavier each evening, not from physical fatigue, but from the accumulated spiritual burden of witnessing more suffering than any single soul should be asked to bear. Your crystal lenses fog with your own labored breathing, creating halos around distant flames that transform London into a landscape from fevered dreams. The streets you traverse tell their own stories of a city under siege by an invisible enemy. Empty houses stand with doors sealed shut, their windows dark as graves. Cats roam freely now, their natural predators, either dead or fled, creating an eerie abundance of feline life amid so much human death. The September night air carries scents you have learned to read, like a physician reads symptoms: wood smoke from cremation fires, lime from mass graves, vinegar from countless attempts of purification, and underneath it all, the sweet corruption of decay that no amount of aromatic herbs can fully mask. Your shadow stretches long behind you, cast by fires that burn continuously now to consume what cannot be buried quickly enough. The familiar landmarks of your daily rounds appear different in darkness. Master Hartwell's house, where red crosses mark the door, the tenement where goodwife Anne rocks her fevered son, the goldsmith's manor, where expensive remedies provide no more healing than prayer. Each location represents another chapter in London's growing bibliography of sorrow. The weight of responsibility settles over you like your leather cloak, heavy with moisture from the night air and the accumulated sweat of day-long labor in protective gear that saves lives by making normal breathing nearly impossible. You carry more than medical supplies in your satchel. You bear the hopes of families who believe education can triumph over pestilence, the fears of parents who watch children slip beyond earthly reach, the final words of dying strangers who entrust their last confessions to your professional discretion. You count your coins, enough for food, never enough for hope. The familiar arithmetic of survival in a city where everything costs more as availability decreases and demand grows desperate. Master Aldrich's gold ducats and the baker's silver pennies weigh equally heavy in your purse, not because their value matches, but because both represent the same fundamental transaction: love attempting to purchase what cannot be bought, desperation seeking to negotiate with forces that accept no earthly currency, hope investing in treatments that work no better than prayer. The lodging house where you rent your small chamber sits quiet tonight, many rooms empty since their occupants either fled London or found permanent rest in the plague pits beyond Aldgate. Your footsteps echo in hallways that once bustled with the conversations of fellow tenants: the clerk who kept accounts for wool merchants, the widow who took in sewing, the young priest who dreamed of advancement within cathedral hierarchy. Now their rooms stand empty, their stories concluded, their voices silenced by the same corruption you fight daily with increasingly ineffective weapons. Your landlord, Master Thomas the Cordwainer, greets you with the weary nod of one survivor acknowledging another. His trade in leather goods has proven surprisingly resilient, as demand for protective gear and burial supplies maintains steady income, even as his other customers succumb to pestilence. "Any word from the cathedral?" he asks, hoping for news of divine intervention or earthly relief that might signal an end to London's suffering. Your shrug provides the only answer your honesty permits. The coins in your purse represent more than payment for professional services. They carry the weight of moral complexity that haunts every transaction in these plague-ridden times. Should healing cost more for those who can afford expensive remedies? Does wealth entitle families to better care than poverty permits? When remedies prove equally useless regardless of price, what ethical framework guides a physician's choices? These questions follow you up narrow stairs toward your chamber, as persistent as the scent of corruption that clings to your protective gear despite hours of exposure to September's cleansing air. In your chamber, you clean your instruments with shaking hands that reveal the day's accumulated strain more honestly than any confession could accomplish. The pewter basin fills with water that turns pink as you wash the lancets clean of blood that carried corruption from bodies now resting in lime-scattered graves. Each tool receives meticulous attention, not because cleaning guarantees their effectiveness tomorrow, but because ritual provides structure when nothing else can impose meaning on endless cycles of suffering and loss. The leather mask sits on its wooden peg like a strange bird of prey, its crystal eyepieces reflecting candlelight in ways that make it seem almost alive. Tomorrow you will don it again, transform once more from mortal man into the walking symbol of medicine's battle against pestilence. Tonight, freed from its weight and restrictions, you can breathe freely for the first time since dawn. Your face bears the red marks where leather pressed against skin, temporary stigmata from your calling's demands. Your hands shake as you record the day's entries in your personal ledger. Not the official parish rolls, but your private accounting of souls witnessed in their final struggles. Master Hartwell's name joins the growing list, though you suspect his suffering ended shortly after your departure. Young Master Robert's fate remains unwritten, though gold cannot alter what your experience predicts. Alice's name waits in terrible possibility, a blank space that tomorrow may fill with ink or hope. Yet something unexpected happened today that your trembling fingers struggle to capture in words. The baker's love for Alice transcended every material calculation, proving that devotion creates its own kind of wealth that gold cannot measure. The gravedigger's wife shared bread with compassionate generosity. Thomas the watchman stood guard over the quarantined, not from duty but from human kindness. Even in plague shadow, London's survivors demonstrate that community endures, that love persists, that tomorrow might yet hold promise despite today's accumulated sorrows. You remove the leather mask, breathing freely for the first time since dawn, and feel your humanity return like blood flowing back into limbs that have been too long compressed. Your face, marked by the day's weight of protective gear, slowly regains sensation as you massage away the pressure that turns flesh into something resembling leather itself. The crystal lenses that showed you so much suffering now rest silent on their wooden shelf, their distorted view of London's pain replaced by natural sight that sees your small chamber with grateful clarity. The September night air that enters through your shuttered window carries different scents now, not the concentrated corruption of sick rooms and plague pits, but the gentler mixture of wood smoke, baking bread from households that still maintain normal routines, and the faint promise of rain that might cleanse the city's streets. Somewhere in the distance you hear not death bells, but the softer sound of a mother singing her child to sleep. A melody that speaks of love continuing despite pestilence, of hope that refuses surrender even in darkness. Your evening prayers take on a different quality tonight, shaped by the day's discoveries about love's persistence in the face of overwhelming despair. You pray for Master Hartwell's peaceful rest, for his family's comfort in grief. You pray for young Master Robert, that gold might for once purchase what love desires. Most fervently, you pray for Alice, not just for her healing, but for the preservation of the hope she represents, the possibility that innocence might triumph over corruption, that tomorrow's dawn might bring news of fever broken rather than life concluded. But tonight, freed from the mask's weight and the day's accumulated horrors, you allow yourself to remember why you chose this calling. Not for the gold that weighs your purse, or the recognition that your learning brings, but for moments when healing works, when families reunite, when children like Alice laugh in bakery shops filled with the scent of rising bread. These memories, precious as they have become rare, remind you that medicine serves hope even when it cannot guarantee healing, that bearing witness to suffering gives it meaning, that tomorrow's rounds might yet bring miracles. And there you rest, having walked through one of history's darkest chapters. You've survived 3 days in medieval London during the Black Death, as the night watchman patrolling streets filled with death carts, as the baker feeding a starving city while caring for young Alice, and as the plague doctor carrying both hope and heartbreak in your leather satchel. You've witnessed humanity at its most vulnerable, yet also at its most resilient. You've seen how ordinary people find extraordinary strength when faced with the unthinkable. You've learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about preserving compassion, maintaining dignity, and protecting the connections that make us human. Through 3 episodes, you've experienced the weight of impossible choices, the comfort of simple kindness, and the quiet heroism of those who continue their calling even when hope seems lost. You've survived medieval London, but more than that, you've discovered what it truly means to endure. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most challenging times. If these stories helped you find peace tonight, a gentle like lets us know we're creating something meaningful. And if you'd like to continue surviving history's most fascinating chapters, consider subscribing. We have many more historical journeys waiting for you. Each series offers the same immersive journey. You wake up, you survive, you discover the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. Until our next historical adventure, sleep well. You've earned your rest.